Okay, guys, today we're going to get into the Enlightenment, and of course, I could actually end up spending weeks and weeks and weeks on this, but I don't have it. So, what we're going to get into is this is a time period that's going to be incredibly revolutionary, and let's just hit it. So, we got to chat first, and let me just give you a basic intro and something you can like pause and read. The Enlightenment was a time in which a variety of thinkers had the opportunity to express and publish their thoughts on a variety of ideas, from government to slavery to religions to metaphysics. Their concepts would eventually prove to be the basis of massive revolutionary movements across the world and many governments that are existent today. So, they're important. And we're going to get into why did all of this happen. And basically, what you ended up happening here is by the time you got to like the 1680s and early 1700s, people were kind of tired of absolute rule. These kings and queens running around doing whatever they want, throwing people into jail and stuff like that. And then the religious wars, that got people all riled up because they didn't like the idea of heretics and people killing each other over religion. And then it turned out that people actually, wanted rights, and, those are important. And then again, and this is so crucial, just kind of like we talked about with the scientific revolution or the Renaissance, you had a bunch of people there that wanted to do it. A group called the Philosophes, and that they would get together and they would talk and they would publish and they would really start to push each other. And it all kind of went down, a lot of them in France, in these things called salons. Not where you get your hair done, although, as we can see in the picture, a lot of fantastic hair going on. A salon was a gathering place in which people would come together and they would kind of debate these ideas and question each other back and forth and ultimately really push each other to achieving some pretty incredible things. And I like to throw in some quotes. There is only one thing which gathers people into seditious commotion, and that is oppression, by John Locke. And John Locke is going to be one of the big guys here. And here is a map of Europe, and if you like philosophy and you like thought, go to it. There's all sorts of guys, and it even goes back to the ancient guys, Aquinas, and then we got down here like Epicurus and Zeno and Socrates and all those types of guys, and Berkeley and Hobbes and Locke and Hume and Kierkegaard, who is just a cool name because it's Kierkegaard, and Karl Marx, it's communism. But, we got a lot of cool stuff going on, and so read these names, and if you like one, read about them. Okay, the guy that really is going to take us out of the gates will be one John Locke, who, fun fact, had asthma and really didn't go outside that much. John Locke is responsible for kind of giving us two basic things that really would push forth a lot of things going on. And first was his two treatises on government, written in 1689, which basically propounds the idea that the purpose of government is to create order, and that in having order, it will ensure people with their basic rights, if I skip down to the bottom there, of life, liberty, and property. Yes, Thomas Jefferson borrowed in quotation marks a little bit from this, but if you really think about it, pretty much everything you do today does go down to ensuring your life, acting free with liberty, and your stuff, which is your property. Now, in general, his belief that people are basically reasonable and will work together, and that rulers should only stay in power if they have the consent of whom they governed. Now, the interesting thing about Locke is he never says that, democracy or a republican-style government like the Romans had is something that should be the best type of government. He doesn't really care what it is, but as long as the government is enabling people to have property, and as long as the government isn't oppressing people, that it really doesn't matter what it is. And he also propounds the idea that if the ruler breaks that contract, that you have the right to rebel. And this is going to be really important for a lot of the ideas of the American independence movement, of the Declaration, and things along that line. The other big thing that he's big on is human kind of dignity. Also in 1689, a fantastic year for Mr. Locke, he wrote the Essay Concerning Human Understanding, which also throws out this idea of tabula rasa, that he believes that everyone is born as a blank slate, and everything we know comes from sensory knowledge, and nothing is actually inherent. Now, what's so interesting about that, if you take that back, that means that in the end, all people are created equal. And this idea is going to be very, very large. It's going to be something that many people will take up. It will become the core of the abolition movement. In many ways, it's the core of the civil rights movement. And if you look on the right here, every man has property in his own person. This nobody has a right to but himself. And not surprisingly, he then pushed for education, because through education, it's crucial for all humans to better themselves. And so, as you can see, Locke is kind of one of the early guys out of the gates and really helps the Enlightenment. Ooh, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Free people, remember this maxim: we may acquire liberty, but it is never recovered if it is once lost. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is another guy that's going to be really important. He's going to be kind of a radical guy as well. Now, early on in his career, he was very big on being anti-property. He wrote something about this concept of the noble savage, that humans were better off without civilization and technology and stuff, and it basically messed everything up, my general belief on video games. However, he is going to change things around a little bit and develops this philosophy of the social contract, that man is brutish with no law or morality, and man will compete with each other. And so what's really important is that if men can come together in groups or a collective human presence, that with society it gives man order, and therefore man needs government. That government is important because what it does is that it is a collective agreement, okay, of people that are together. Interestingly enough, he wasn't a big fan of private property. Locke would not have agreed with him at all, and a lot of his ideas on property are often seen as the forebearer of communism or socialism. Now, what this then goes on is that also he looks a little bit differently at the concept of the will of the majority, and that yes, society is important. However, just because the majority of people want it doesn't mean it's necessarily right, which is an interesting philosophical thought, which we'll discuss in class. But in the end, he feels that the goal of the government should be to secure rights for all people of freedom, equality, and justice. And this should be done for all people, regardless of that will of the majority. And that's really, really interesting, that the government should, again, providing liberty and freedom for their people. He's also a big idea on the government being motivated by morality, and feels that politics and morals should not be separate. And just like Locke, that he feels that the government, again, derives its authority from the people, and if the state does not act in a proper manner, then it ceases to have that authority and people should rebel. He was also very anti-slavery. One of his most famous quotes, "Man is born free and everywhere he is in chains," and really looks to encourage people that if they are not given freedom and liberty, that not only do they have the right to rebel, but they have the responsibility. Now, another guy that's going to be really important is Charles de Secondat, the Baron of Montesquieu, who we just kept it simple, was Montesquieu. Now, he's going to be really important for his really structure of what he feels is the most important type of government in his famous work, The Spirit of Laws. And he feels that law is really important. And this guy was incredibly bright. He actually went to college when he was 11. That's pretty awesome. And in 1748, The Spirit of Laws came out, and he really liked a lot of aspects of English government, despite the fact that he was a Frenchman living under French rule. And the big thing that he's going to stress is that law is crucial, and it needs to produce justice. And if it produces justice, people will have liberty. And the only way that can happen, according to Montesquieu, is if you have a republican government. So here's one of your first guy that really is advocating republicanism big time. Okay. And the only way that liberty can happen is if that the government has a division of powers. If that you have these branches and each branch can check itself. This is the foundation of the American government system. We basically adopt it wholesale. He believes in an executive, a judicial, and a legislative, and that all people should be balanced. He believes in lots of laws for individual people, like trial by jury, and voting is a big thing for him, although you can see his richness comes out because he feels that the poor shouldn't have the right to vote because they don't have any interest as well, and that they aren't informed, thus helping to form the basis of our electoral college, and we can talk about that in class. And in the end, everything comes down to having good laws, and that people are only punished for external actions, that if people speak or have ideas, they shouldn't be punished with them unless they actually do something. So this guy not only provided the basis of our government, the basis of some of our elections, as well as the basis for much of our law. But the guy that was really the main one was Francois-Marie Arouet, better known as Voltaire. And Voltaire was the guy, not necessarily the most original philosopher, but the guy that made philosophy hip, cool, and absolutely blew it up. He lived in a France that was just, horrifically oppressive after Louis XIV and then the 15th and the 16th. People that spoke out against the government were sent to jail. I already gave you the example of the guy that was put into a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot cell for 3 years. They even put books on trial. Rousseau was actually banished, and his works were were actually not born, I'm sorry, were banned. Newton's works were forgiven. You could go to jail. If you spoke out against the government or church, you could be executed. And Voltaire was really this young guy that came out and started arguing and would publish books about how he's seen horrible things. And he really started as a young guy trying to get the word out, of trying to be a guy that showed how horrible the conditions were, because he was a great guy that realized that if you can expose the problems, that maybe people will be willing to try to change them. Unfortunately for him, he goes to jail a lot, but because he was popular, they actually didn't kill him. He actually was sent to the Bastille so many times that he ended up having his own room, and he is just going to publish and publish like a champ. His main work that he actually published was Candide, and he had a lot of basic ideas that he pushed forth. And one of the big ones that was kind of, I think, important to him was this concept of believing. Voltaire pushed everyone to believe in something, that is the most important thing that you could do, to believe in something and to fight for it. And he believed in everything, and that freedom of speech and things like that. He was very anti-religion and felt that toleration was the only key. He would really speak out against fanaticism quite a bit, as well as the church should be taxed, and fighting against heretics, and was really passionate about that. He also pushed forth an interesting type of religion as well, if you will, this idea of Deism, which, by the way, a lot of our founding fathers like George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson were a fan of. This idea of believing in God but not religion. He wasn't the first guy to push forth this idea, but many others would really take up after him. And he is the guy, not John Adams. John Adams quoted him, so people thought John Adams said it, but the idea of freedom of speech, of I do not agree with a word you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And this guy's really influence was huge. It was his fighting for the acceptance and his popularity that got people to investigate the Enlightenment, to get other thinkers to be willing to write and express their ideas. I mean, he's like one of the world's first celebrities that actually used his power to accomplish something. It's kind of remarkable like that. And he was really critical in getting the spread of the Enlightenment. He was very close with the King of Prussia, as well as you see on the right, the Tsarina of um, Russia being Catherine, and he had the rulers start to adopt some things, and you will see some subtle changes. They're not great, but it's better than nothing. But it will go everywhere, and if you think back and like glance back to that map that I showed you, you can see, I mean, he was really influential in spreading it. You see Enlightenment thinkers go everywhere, and of course he published like every 10 minutes, in that publication is not only will help spread the Enlightenment, but also spreading the ideas of industrialization and science. And again, we go back to our friend Gutenberg, and Voltaire was just a titan. Yes, he might not be the most original guy, but he probably did more than any other guy to spread these ideas. And that's what's interesting. A lot of times you have ideas develop, and it's a long time before they're adopted. Within 50 years of these ideas being published, you're going to see them start to become present, particularly in the United States. All right, guys, so get your comments and questions. We'll talk about these deep thinkers in class, and I'll see you soon.